Head over to our panel now. We have here Leslie Marshall. She's a nationally syndicated radio talk show host, The Leslie Marshall Show, and she's, of course, a Fox News contributor as well. Hi there, Leslie, joining us from Los Angeles this morning at a reasonable hour of your time.
Good morning.
Glad you're not up in the middle of the night for us. And Loretta Lepore joins us, and she is the founder and president of Lepore Associates. Hope I'm saying that properly. And she is down in Atlanta, a lot closer to the action than we are here in New York. Loretta, let's start with you. Let me get your reaction as a Southern lady to this law down here.
Well, I mean, we've seen this sort of be a trend in southern states recently where they have tightened up their voting requirements. In Georgia here, we've had a number of reform efforts underway over the last couple of years. So it's not unprecedented. And as Rick mentioned in his report, 32 states now require that voters registering need to have some form of government identification. They vary state to state. The challenges also are not unexpected because we've seen that in other southern states as well when various reforms have taken place.
All right, Leslie, so I take it that you're not a fan of the law. So what's the problem here?
Well, there are a lot of problems. I mean, first of all, we don't really have a voting fraud problem. It's a very nice soundbite, but we don't have any proof of that in any of these or any of the 50 states.
Well, and
what the problem is that Republicans
she was just talking about that in front of the American Bar Association. You really believe that?
I'm saying that if we have a voter fraud problem, we only have had it since Democrats have been sweeping the elections in the past two major elections, and I think Republicans fear that for the next two. And when we look at the demographic of the voter changing, we have more minorities, Hispanics and African Americans, more women, more youth voting, and the elderly are not, the senior citizens, putting their support as in the past behind Republicans. This clearly is a disadvantage to people that do not have. Rick made a very good point. If you are working at a fast food franchise part-time or even full-time, you're a minimum wage worker, you're a poverty level on an annual income, you're not going to be able to have the time off to get this identification. This, in my opinion, is nothing more than trying to prevent people from voting Democratic, but we will get those people to the polls somehow, I promise.
This is a change, as Rick mentioned, and there are a few provisions of the bill, but one in particular is 17 days early voting has now been shrunk down to 10 days of early voting. You say that people still won't be able to get the time off work just because they have 10 days, not 17 days. But, you know, let's just say that you are correct and that voter fraud is not a problem in the United States. I think a lot of our viewers would disagree with that assertion. But if that is the case, what is the problem with just asking people to have a photo ID? As the governor of North Carolina points out, you have to have a photo ID, a government-issued ID, in order to hop on an airplane. You've got to buy it. You've got to have one in order to buy a Sudafed. Why not to vote?
Well, to buy a Sudafed, that's because people are making drugs, unfortunately, as I found out when I went to buy Sudafed at like the pharmacy or Target and had to show my ID. You know what? If we really feel that identification is so key, why not have a national ID? Why not have a national ID program? That's not been proposed. And again, why now? Why is this a problem now? Why is voter fraud a problem now? Nobody seemed to think it was a problem when we even had a legal case, Gore v. Bush, for crying out loud. This,
Loretta,
to me, is political in nature.
Let's bring you back in, Loretta. Leslie's talking about a national ID, which is, you know, frankly, a whole other ball of wax. And is that something that Congress wants to jump into right now? Perhaps not. We've got sort of bigger fish to fry in our country at the national level. But what do you think of this whole argument that Leslie's making?
Well, I disagree with her on the voter fraud issue because one of the audiences or one of the potential population pools that she's left out of the discussion is the number of illegal immigrants that are currently in this country. And some of these laws and some of the states have taken direct aim at those folks who are not in this country legally and therefore do not have a constitutional right to vote. And so some of these laws are aimed at those folks. And that would be direct voter fraud. Now, proving that is going to be very challenging. And so when she talks about us not knowing about voter fraud, it's very difficult to determine that. In Georgia, for example, our Secretary of State has for a year and a half been asking for access to the federal database that says whether potential voters applying for their registration are U.S. citizens or not. That's a simple act. That's a simple way to know whether folks that are signing up to register to vote are citizens of this country. And so I think that the whole fraud issue is not just in the recent years, in the recent 2 years. I think it's been longer. I think state governments have just taken a more proactive stance in recent years.
Yeah, Loretta, this is certainly something that we've been covering here at the Fox News channel for quite some time. So Leslie, I got to disagree with you. I think it's not a new claim on the part of Republicans and conservatives talking about the issue of voter fraud, and we should all be concerned about the issue of voter fraud, Republican or Democrat. Ladies, we're going to have to leave it there. Leslie Marshall, a well-known face here on the Fox News channel. She's a nationally syndicated radio host, Leslie Marshall Show, and a Fox News contributor. And Loretta Lepore, she's the president of Lepore & Associates out of the Atlanta Bureau. Thank you, ladies, both for joining us.